We're working.
Yeah, man, we're live. So, for some of those who tried to get on with us earlier, we are just exactly like the medical field. We're late. I am now working in the medical field, and nobody is on time. So, I apologize for that. Plus, none of you guys are on time anyway. I know half of you guys in this group, and you guys aren't a punctual group of people anyway. So, I just did y'all a favor. So, guys, today we're going to try and create some value through our little group here. Group's been fun. We've had all kinds of different people from competitive power lifters to first-time lifters to people like Derek Phillips who probably don't even work out, and they're in our group. So I appreciate Derek being the one that eats Kentucky Fried Chicken and fasts and eats. I think he eats, what did he say? I think he eats 4,000 calories in a 4-hour window or something like that for intermittent fasting. So maybe we'll answer that question. So I appreciate Derek being here and listening and probably busting my chops for being 14 minutes late. But guys, so what I want to do today is bring on Mike Wines. I'm going to let Mike introduce himself. Mike actually came on when I was at Athletes Arena as an intern. And Mike, kind of tell him what you're doing now, and you've been a big value to the group, just answering some questions from a scientific level, unlike myself, who just shoots bullcrap off the hip. You come in and correct me with some science, so that's much appreciated. So give him a little bit of background of what you're doing right now, and then we'll go into this quick rapid fire question and answer and probably move on to the next one maybe here in another week or so.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I just want to say thanks for having me on and give me the opportunity to speak. So as you mentioned, I was an intern with Athletes Arena and then worked there for about a year. Subsequently moved on and worked for a large-scale fitness website and found that I wanted to pursue a bit more of the sciences. So now I'm on getting my master's from East Tennessee State, studying under Dr. Mike Stone and a few other individuals there. And it's one of 3 Olympic training sites in the U.S. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening and a lot of applied strength and conditioning coming out of that university. So it's definitely a big time opportunity and kind of serves as the basis for my education.
Sure. To give them some names of some people, I've known ETSU and Megan Mike Stone and all that. If you're not in the industry, name some people that have kind of come through there that we've probably read about.
From like an athlete perspective,
sure, athlete,
or
fitness, wellness, nutrition. There's been some pretty cool people come through that program.
Yeah. So perspective, one of the big names is Dr. Mike Israetel, and he came out with his master's and PhD from ETSU. Currently runs Renaissance Periodization and is very big on social media and works with the guys at JTS Strength in California. From an athlete perspective, the Olympic training site mainly focuses on canoe and kayak, bobsled, and a few track athletes. So
I know it's one of the very few real strength and conditioning from an application perspective schools in the country. They kind of launched that strength and conditioning application of strength conditioning and nutrition perspective with Megan Mike Stone and their research lab and all that kind of stuff. And I know that was probably early 2000s when that launched. That got really big. So, Mike, we'll kind of dive into some questions. I know me and you got a lot of questions, and we'll dive into some stuff. And we were talking earlier before we went live. When you're not really in the industry, it's so hard to weed out the bull crap. Because if there's an industry that's got more bull crap, dude, it's strength and conditioning and fitness and nutrition, right? We got people running around doing detoxes, doing intermittent fasting with Derek Phillips and doing Zumba, right? And, and coming to you wondering why they're not losing weight or what they're not. And, people always try to make this such a complex thing. Do you agree? They try to make fitness and nutrition so complex because there's such bullcrap that they're fed every day online or what they read or books or, you got motivational speakers doing, their 4-hour workout week and whatever Tim Ferriss put out. But, let's bump to some of the questions. One of the questions, and this is very common, you get the high reps, low weight versus low reps, high weight, and how it affects the body. Where this comes is probably a lot in women who work out, right? How many times you get women say, I don't want to lift weights because I'm going to get bulky. I want to use 5-pound weights and do 50 reps, or guys who live their life on the 1 to 3 rep range. Give us a little bit about what science is saying about high reps, low weight, low reps, high weight, and how does it affect the body, if it does affect the body. Give us some lowdown on that.
Yeah. So I think the first question you always need to ask is, what's the goal? So what's just the context for that question and for the implementation of that method? And the more that we understand where the person is trying to get to, then it will help us set those kind of intermediate. So if it's more of a sports-specific sport itself, that will drive the application of that method. If it is a sport that we must consider, is it in season, is it preseason, is it postseason? What phase of training are we in? Even if we're just talking about hypertrophy perspective, we have to consider, are we focusing more on an accumulation phase or more of a realization phase? But I think really the main driver that we want to get at is, if the goal is hypertrophy, we look at research from Brad Schoenfeld, and he's one of the main guys. And what he's postulated is that you have a certain threshold for hypertrophy. And generally, that's about 60% is his suggestion there. 60% of your 1RM or your 1 rep max. Others say it's a little bit higher, 70 to 85%. But that's kind of the first thing that you want to think about there is there a certain threshold that I need to be hitting? And he also mentioned in one of his papers that above a certain tension-induced threshold, that become more important at that point. So that's where you'll find things like drop sets and supersets. And I think the real differentiation here between the two is the adaptations on a cellular level and then a neural level. So if we're talking about specifically higher reps, or excuse me, higher weight, lower reps, that's going to give you a higher activation of higher threshold motor units. So that's one of your main drivers of power output. It's also going to give you an improvement in what's called rate coding, which is basically how often your motor units send a signal to the muscle to fire. You're going to get a decrease in things like your Golgi tendon organs, which inhibit the muscle from firing under high loads. And you'll also see that you'll get changes within things like myosin heavy chains within the muscle. You'll get an increased type 2 to type 1 ratio. And basically what all these things are doing is they're improving your ability to exhibit strength, rate of force development, and power. So again, in someone who has more of a hypertrophy goal, they might not care about any of those. That's more of a factor. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're going to consider them the opposite of the spectrum, high reps, low weight, if we go back to that cellular mechanism, what you find in the literature is that you see more of a hypertrophy in type 1 fibers as that set progresses, because those type 2As and those type 2Xs will actually drop out. And so what you find in bodybuilders, they have more hypertrophy in the type 1s, but on a relative strength scale, they're typically weaker. Okay. So again, it kind of comes back to that goal. What's your end goal? Just to be jacked and tan, or are you looking at it from more of a power sports specific perspective?
Sure. So if you're your everyday person, right? If somebody's going to say, we talk about phase potentiation, right?
Sure.
And there is some stuff that they're doing as far as like, you got to increase capacity to increase strength. When you increase strength, you can increase capacity, right? And I know there's actually a long time ago some research at University of South Carolina about that. I know Dr. Carson looked at a lot of that early on.
Yep.
If you're a person who is just, hey, I just want to work out, be in good shape, I want to be moderately strong, moderately have hypertrophy, and be able to do this for long periods of time, mixing rep ranges it can be interesting, right? They can keep it interesting for longer, which is going to keep them training, because in general population, most people get done working out because they're bored, right? You got to keep them excited. Sure. Messing with rep ranges, it can keep it interesting, right? But then you can keep having better results over a long period of time. The trick is when you get past the linear strength and muscle curve that people hit, right? People go through that first 3 to 6 months where they're like, I'm hitting gains every day, right? Then what do you do, right? Yeah. How do you get past that first linear period of getting gains, right? Because it happened all the time when I train athletes. A kid would never work out in their life, right? I would train them for 3 months and the parent would think you're a genius. Yeah. And you're like, no, I could have gave him the bar and said, lug around a medicine ball and lift weight, and with no nothing, and he's going to get stronger,
Yeah.
right? So what you're saying is lower reps, higher weight, that neurological response for strength, where higher reps, lower weight, around 60%, more likely for hypertrophy. But if you mix them throughout the year, you can start having gains in both, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's something someone could take. Next question we get, overtraining, right? First of all, I want to answer this in two parts. Can you explain the difference between overtraining and overreaching?
Sure.
How overtraining is kind of a rare thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finding an overtrained athlete or an overtrained person in the gym, I mean, you can walk outside and go to the mall and find out we don't have an overtraining issue, right? Right? I mean, trust me, the biggest problem in America is not our people are highly overtrained, right? And I guess this person, what they're talking about is doing lifting and then maybe like a yoga in the evening. Am I doing my body a disservice by doing that much? Is it simply just calories burned versus, what you're eating, calories in, calories out? And so explain the difference between overtraining and overreaching, if you can, real quick. And then explain some symptoms of somebody who's actually burnt out. Because there's so many people that get gung-ho about working out, right? And they go out and kill it for 2 months. And then they're like, I can't maintain this.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of explain the difference between overtraining, overreaching, and then what would be some symptoms of doing too much?
Sure. So overreaching is really a planned manipulation in your training where you push harder than normal. And typically it also incurs a sudden increase in volume and or an upregulation in intensity. And from that, afterwards, after the overreach, you typically taper down. And usually that is used before a competition in terms of stimulating an over compensation. But in overtraining, that's where you have this phenomenon where you keep increasing volume and you steadily longer keep up with that adaptation. And from like a macro perspective, long-term, ideally what you're looking for in any sort of training is you're looking for this SRA curve where you have a stimulus, recovery from that, and then the subsequent adaptation for the next time. And so really with overtraining, you're getting that stimulus, but you're never really having that recovery period to where you're coming back down to baseline and then allowing for that adaptation. So then you see in certain papers, there's one published in 2016 by Droro, and he showed that there were changes in cytokines, IL-6, C-reactive protein, IL-10 in overtrained athletes, so that they were under the same workload as other athletes, but because of the endocrine factors within them, they actually had a completely different adaptation to the workload than someone else. So that's really your two main differences. One is planned, and one is typically from a lack of planning and just doing too much.
Sure.
But I will say that with the overtraining, it's very tough to get there unless you're coupling that with extreme caloric restriction or some sort of other disease or hormone-mediated issue.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, and Mike Isertil says it all the time, there's no such thing as overtraining, you're underfeeding, right?
Sure.
And I see the overtraining effects mostly come with people who honestly, they become to get scared of food. You ever talk with people that get scared of food?
Yeah.
Because maybe they were overweight at one point, they lost weight, they assume they apply eating food, especially carbohydrates, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are scared of carbs? I mean, how many people say they don't like to eat carbs, but they eat carbs because they really don't know what a carb is?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like people that say they don't eat wheat, but then they eat food that has wheat in them. I'm like, I can't, what are we talking about? People who are afraid to eat, right? Because they lost weight and they're under extreme caloric restriction and their body just doesn't recover.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do 4,000 calories a day now, right? I train really hard. Me and you have had these conversations. And when you train this hard, you have to eat that way to get results. Calories aren't bad, right? Mm-hmm. People have assumed these calories are bad, or having fat in your diet is bad, or having carbohydrates is bad. And I agree with you exactly. People usually who are under big time caloric restriction, they're the ones that hit those symptoms.
Mhm.
For people out there that are watching this, that are your general, we got some guys that are involved in powerlifting, jiu-jitsu, just working out. Give us 3 or 4 things to be on the lookout that you might be close to being like peaked out, right?
Yeah.
I know sleep's one of them. You're big on sleep. Give us a couple things to look at so people can be aware of what it's like.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things to consider is, are you overtraining from an intensity perspective, which would be more of your powerlifting population, or just generally those who like to push the envelope? Yeah. Or are you overtraining from more of a volume perspective? And that could be anyone from an endurance athlete to perhaps someone who likes to lift weights, but then also incorporates other sports. Because really everything is feeding into that stress bucket.
Yep.
Not only your career, but also your training and everything else. So we have to consider on both ends of the spectrum which way we're going. And then within each side of that spectrum, you can also have parasympathetic and sympathetic overtraining. So each one has different symptoms. But to keep it fairly basic, if you overtrain with more intensity, what you'll find is that you'll be the type of person to wake up feeling like you definitely got hit by a truck. And that's more of your neurological symptoms. And you'll typically find if you overtrain on that end of the spectrum, you'll see appetite take a pretty hard dive. And that'll be the first thing to kind of get knocked off. And then you'll see typically sleep will be the next factor that's influenced, not just how long it takes you to get asleep, so sleep latency, but then are you waking up multiple times in the middle of the night? Are you waking up at a specific time every single night? When you wake up in the morning, are you feeling refreshed? Are you able to go throughout the day without caffeine? All of these factors are definitely more related to the intensity side of the equation. Whereas with volume, what you'll find is typically you'll see an upregulation of appetite, at least initially. And then if the volume continues to the point where it becomes excessive, then you'll see appetite fall off.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so on the volume side, you may find issues as intensity, whereas you'll probably find on both sides you're going to have some issues with recovery from a physiological perspective in terms of soreness. It's going to take longer for each individual body part to actually recover. So if you're working a body part and it takes you 7 or 8 days to recover from that level of soreness, either one, you're doing way too much volume, or from a hormonal endocrine perspective, you just aren't simply turning over that tissue quick enough, or there's something else going on underneath the surface. So you'll find that it'll take you longer to recover. You'll see joint issues start popping up. Something will start hurting that wasn't hurting before, and you haven't changed that much. Or you'll see performance fall off in this other sports that you're perhaps taking part in. So whether that be BJJ or jiu-jitsu or cycling, anything like that, you'll quickly see a decrease in performance. You'll also want to, the quickest one to look at is just libido. If that falls off, then that can be a pretty good indicator that there is something going on there from a training front. There was just a study that was floating around on Facebook recently looking at the correlation between overall training volume in endurance athletes and libido. And there was actually a correlation between the two, and they found that as volume increased, typically libido would decrease. And I think you can apply that across any
Did somebody post that on Lyle McDonald's page, I think?
I think so.
Because he's been big on libido lately. Like the last 2 days, he's just posted everything about just some crazy stuff. Hey, someone typed in, Mark McClure said in, he made a comment, extra sleep does not make up for poor diet. Poor programming or diet will not mitigate problems stemming from lack of sleep.
Sure.
I think that's one thing how many times you've had people be like, oh, it's been a long day. I only slept 4 hours last night. I'm going to get a good 12 in tonight. Well, not really. It's not really how that works, right? And I'm a big nap guy too. Here's one. Women cellulite, right? I mean, every woman wants to get rid of that, right? Yeah. This one's probably for Derek as well. How do you address cellulite? Heavy lifting, diet, both? Give me the quick answer on that because I mean, this is way outside of my knowledge. What do you think here? I just lost it. There you go.
On this, man, a lot of what is okay. Still there? Are we good?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And a lot of the research that has been done on this so far has been relating to just supplements. But a couple of the papers that I read through were mentioning that if you can decrease the overall, subsequently then reduce cellulite, obviously. So your best bet there is going to be obviously nutrition, which is going to then incur weight loss and hopefully reduce the size of those adipocytes. And I think the other thing to consider is from a hypertrophy perspective, if you're increasing the cross-sectional area of the muscle underneath the skin and then subsequently reducing the size of each adipocyte, that's going to give you the best bang for your buck because you're basically working both to increase muscle size but then reduce subsequent adipocyte thickness. And so you may find that over time, those two make more of a difference than you realize. And
so if you got
focusing,
if you got cellulite in your butt, squat, lunge, hip thrust, build the hypertrophy. Short answer. Yeah.
And not assuming that there will be a correlation between what site you're working and what is reduced.
Sure. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Site reduction. Yeah. I don't want to play with that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. All right. Looking at some other things. Here's a good one. I think this one really works with general population, right? We sometimes forget that some of the people that we're reading and listening to and paying attention to, especially athletes, they're full-time athletes. Their job is to train, right? Especially when you look at like the CrossFit population. Some of those people are paid to do this full time. We got people that got jobs, sure, right? We got things to do, right? How do time constraints fit in the equation as far as efficacy and training? Efficiency, I'm sorry. How does time constraints fit in the equation as far as efficiency and training? I have an hour and 15 minutes in the day to train 6 days a week. Someone sent this one in. Would the quick question to that be, depends on what your goal is?
Yeah.
Would that be the quick answer? Because, not all of us can be Alex Vieta, right?
Yeah.
I mean, big, fast, strong, ultra marathoner, right?
Yeah.
When you look at the normal person who's got multiple goals of just general conditioning, how would you recommend an efficient program for someone that does have just an hour to train? That's a loaded question. I know, man. I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah. I actually just wrote an entire article on this, laying out a program. So if they want a more in-depth answer, they can go look that up and just Google my name. And the program is actually on my author profile. But long answer would be, I think you need to prioritize, obviously, those major movements which are going to stimulate the most muscle mass and are going to correspond with whatever your goal is. That'll determine your set and rep range. And if so, using some mobility work in between sets, utilizing those rest periods for more accessory-based movements. So if you got a big compound movement like a squat or deadlift, supersetting that with any sort of midsection or core work is going to help to fill in that time in an effective means. And it won't be complete rest, but it will also give you a much lower stimulus that then you don't have to incorporate that core work at the end, and you can plug it in the middle using things like supersets and trisets or giant sets. And then being smart about your warm-up and making sure that some people are taking 20, 30 minutes to warm up, and they got to foam roll and stretch and hit the bike and do everything else. Being smart about that and understanding that there are multiple different ways to warm up. Some take 5, 6, 7 minutes and you're good to go. So kind of understanding how to warm up and then how to structure that lift will definitely save you a lot of time.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely like the idea of I know when I didn't have that much time to train, I would hit my mobility in between my rest time because I could allow my heart rate to drop, but still work some mobility at the same time. And then I think another short answer to that is, you know, and this came out, I don't know if you saw Windler come out with the 20 things you're good at to be a complete athlete. Did you ever see that he came out with?
Yeah.
And I think that the problem with an article like that is people are going to read that article and go, I'm going to go out and get really good at that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go run a really awesome mile and 5K. I'm going to squat 500. I'm going to bench 4. You know, I'm going to have a 10-foot broad jump, and I'm going to do all this at the same time. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? You know, nobody can train to live for a peak 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Right? So I think the best way to have efficiency in your training is to break your training cycle into mini goals. Because a lot of people who are adults who just want to be regular general fitness people, they're driven by like little internal goals, right? And just drive and figure out what those little internal goals are, and then recover from those goals, come up with another goal, recover from those goals. Because it's hard to stay in awesome shape year round, you know? Last one that I think is gonna, I got you there, Mike, you logged it, you connected there? I think I just lost you again. All right, if we can't get Mike, this might be the end of our first one, which is cool. But yeah, we can go ahead and end there. I think we got some camera issues with Mike. If you guys go ahead and comment on this this video. If you got other questions, go to my page. See if there's other questions you might have that talk about just overall training. Mike can answer. I can answer. We'll do more of these in the future. But I hope you guys get some good information. We'll do this as much as what you guys want. You know, we'll do it. So appreciate you guys coming on. We'll answer some more questions in the future. And hopefully this gets you guys back in training and working hard.
Are we back? We good now?
Yeah, I went ahead and logged it off. But,
okay.
Yeah, because we were running low on time.
Okay.
But, what do you think, man? Is this something we can do once in a while? I mean, would this be good for you to get some content out for you?
I think we're still live.
Are you? I hope not. Are we? Okay.
I'm still live in my